Anybody here older than 63? Got me beat? There's one. Wonderful. Good for you. I'm gaining on you. So here's my topic, user-driven democracy. And I'm talking about this because I've been working on user-driven everything for the last 5-some years, leading a project called Project VRM at the Berkman Center. But it's basically a bunch of distributed open source developers and some commercial developers, some both, working on many topics at once, including stuff that has to do with democracy. And I'm going to go, there's so many projects that I can't go into all of them, and I'm going to touch on some of them at the end. But this is an interesting thing because, I mean, user-driven, that's what we would want from personal democracy, right? But, you know, Douglas Rushkoff was here 3 years ago saying personal democracy was oxymoronic, right? And we should give up on the internet. I think he said a little later than that. This is aspirational, you know, the idea of that we have a personal effect on the democratic process. We're up against stuff. It's still aspirational. So how do we get there, or what are we up against? And so Larry Lessig yesterday, in a characteristically brilliant performance, he's the best preacher of our time, I think, gave the case of North Carolina as one of the failures, the instructive failures that we had. I participated in that. I deserve an F from Jay Rosen for the job I did on this one because, and a lot of us did. I mean, I lived in North Carolina for 20 years. I went to college there. I have more relatives there than in any other state. I mobilized them and all across the political spectrum, hardcore right-wingers and left-wingers. They all agreed this is an insane thing, but it still passed, and we still failed. And Larry, you know, part of the theme yesterday was that we've taken this for granted. We've taken for granted that the carriers, the phone and cable companies, all due respect to AT&T and their help out here, but these are regulatory zoo animals that have taken over the facility, okay? They would not live in a truly free market if they got put out in one, but they're still living inside the zoo that they control. It's called regulatory capture. Why do we take this for granted? Why did the legislators buy this? Well, I want to put an image in your mind. I want to put a metaphor in your mind that I hope will help out in the shortest possible time, right? Looking at sort of long, you know, horizons of effects, and we're hoping in the fullness of time things work out. But I hope this metaphor helps, and this is it. A calf and a cow. I mean, that's us there, okay, on the bottom. And this, in fact, is what I call personal democracy, O point, whatever you want to make it. We haven't got it yet here in the U.S. We're getting there. We're moving there. We wouldn't be doing this if we weren't. But we're up against something. What we're up against is this. That is the commercial web. The model for the commercial web, which is the one we're inhabiting, is the one you're tweeting on right now. You're not tweeting on IRC. You know, you're using a commercial product. You're living in a commercial space that could go away. I mean, you're living inside of something. But we're in these things because this is the commercial web model. And we've had this model since 1995 when the cookie was invented. And you know, Phil Windley, who's one of the developers in the VRM world that I work in, has a great slide he gives where he says, history of e-commerce, 1995, the invention of the cookie, the end. Because that's kind of how it went. It's gone, dude. We got cookies. We could track people around. This is wonderful. We're done. So you might say, well, we have social media. Social media was a wonderful thing. And there's a lot of social media. The interesting thing is, and this is a slide by, or an image by a guy named Brian Solis. He's a good guy. I like him. And he's probably the king of classifying social media. And all of these pedals here are actually, they're co-silos of many commercial entities. And we live in these things. We actually live in these things. And so what effect does that have? And I think that actually Despair.com put it really well. I love this thing. It's a T-shirt that they have. You know, how many of us are on Facebook, Foursquare, and Twitter right now? I mean, and we live in this, and there's a little too much truth to this thing. And it's probably why, you know, I understand today that the that the French government doesn't want the news organizations saying, follow us on Twitter or follow us on X, because you're advertising this commercial entity. Well, I don't like that kind of interference either, but bravo for them for at least identifying what is in fact a problem as well as a solution in other circumstances. In any case, it's not what this guy, Tim Berners-Lee, had in mind when he said the web ought to be this kind of thing, a universal linked information system, generality, portability, more important than fancy graphics techniques and complex extra facilities. Well, we live in these complex extra facilities now. And if you're looking at this from the corporate side, if you're looking at this as a business person, and you're living either you're doing CRM, which is customer relationship management. CRM's that's what gives you call centers and junk mail and things like that. Well, CRM is like the $16 billion business, and that's where we're just talking about the software business. The actual activity is much larger than that. But if you listen to the way people talk inside companies, you're going to have this kind of language. You're targeting, acquiring, controlling, retaining, managing, and locking in and owning customers. This is the language of what? Slavery. Slavery, exactly. It's the language of slavery. We talk like this. I was talking a few years ago to a guy who worked at a big box department store. He said, most of our executives are women, and we love our customers. We call them guests. We do everything we can to own the customer. And I said, what's another word for owning a human being? And he said, slavery. Why do we talk like that? I said, well, you're talking to yourselves. You're not really talking to the customers. So it's also the language of something else. It's the language of agriculture. It's the language of animal husbandry. It's the language of ranching. And so, in a way, the model we're talking about, the commercial web model for personal democracy is the ranch. You're branding these people, right? But the technical word for this, and this is where we have the problem, the technical word for this is client-server. Client-server is a common term. It's a way of doing computing, and you sort processes out between a server and a client, and that's how we've built the web. And it's top-down. If you look up client-server and Google Images or wherever, you're going to see images that look like this. And it's very hierarchical. But in other words, it's basically submissive-dominant. We have a submissive relationship with the things, with servers and the things they represent and the people that are there and the processes that are there. So when we go browsing on the web, we're going in there for milk and cookies. The milk is HTML and JavaScript and little graphics and a little link out to YouTube or whatever. And we get cookies along with these. The cookies are these little files that keep track of our state, where we were before. But there are also these tracking files. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them on most of our browsers. And as a result, online users have no more power than the sites give them. And I threw Apple's little thing in here. If you have an iPhone, you've seen one of these things that say that you can't really read it here very well, but have you read page 1 of 55? If you get to page 33 or whatever it is, it says, oh, by the way, we could change all the terms if we want anyway. So what's even the point of reading these things? These are called contracts of adhesion, or standard form contracts. They came up in the 1850s. We haven't changed them. It's the information age. It's still 1943 in most of the business and the way we're doing this stuff. And we still have this relationship. And this has not escaped the attention of the Wall Street Journal, which has had an excellent series. I'd give them a J. Rose an A on this one, starting last summer, on reporting on what's going on. Because, with absolute power, it corrupts, and that's what they have. That's what we have thanks to this system. And the interesting thing about this particular one, I was at a conference last summer where Eric Schmidt was speaking, and we had to tweet our questions to the stage. And David Kirkpatrick, who was interviewing Eric, says, Doug Searls asks a question, and then Eric, I'm in the front row, he looks at me for like 5 minutes, and he goes on about this kind of stuff. You have no anonymity. We could figure you out. We know you totally, and it's a wonderful thing. And I wanted to say, big guy, stop talking. We need to stop time right now. You're being evil. Don't watch out. But he's not an evil guy, but when you live in this environment, you start thinking and talking like that. So this is just one site that the Wall Street Journal investigators, dictionary.com, that had a record number of cookies that it would put on your, and not only cookies, flash files and beacons and first and third party this and that, but ways of tracking you. And I was actually looking, I wanted an image like that went with the cattle, like a herding dog of some sort that yaps at the heels of sheep, but instead I found this this cute thing. Which, but that's what's going on. They're tracking you. It's not just like one company. All these, they're leaving these little dogs with you to follow you around. And there's this notion they have. If you go to one of the advertising conferences, which I've been to, and I've been invited to very graciously by John Battelle, who works both sides of this. He's a journalist and he's also an advertising guy. They're very rah-rah. We know everything. You don't need to do anything. We're just going to know everything about you because we can follow you around and we get perfect knowledge of you. And it's not right. The interesting thing is there's this company called Rapleaf. Rapleaf was beat up more than any other company by the Wall Street Journal. And they came around after that. And now they're getting A's from the companies that are rating these things because they let you go in and opt out of whatever it is they're doing for you. So I looked at my own stuff. I mean, here they want you to have an experience. They're going to personalize your experience. How many people here want their experience personalized by Rapleaf or whatever? If you drop your hand if you're in the advertising business, right? So, I mean, it's a conceit that's insane. And so I looked at, I'm not even going to show you the basic demographics. I said I was old and I live in a town. You think, yeah, I live in the town. And I actually don't live in that town most of the time, but what the hell, let it be. But my interests are blogging, news and current events, sports, and travel. Anybody here not fall into that group, right? So when you dig down into this, miscellaneous, that was all of interest, by the way. That was the whole thing, right? And you look into miscellaneous, and I look down this thing, well, I completed graduate school. I never even went to graduate school. I had the wrong zip code, and that's one I corrected 6 months ago, the first time I looked at this, by the way. I took out my household income. They were way off. I wish I had it, but I don't. It says I'm single. My wife is here. I've been married more than 20 years. That's wrong. How long I've owned a house. And if I go down to all this stuff that on the next page as it goes down, they're wrong on about half the stuff. And I'm not like an invisible guy. It's not like I'm hard to figure out, right? So this personalization stuff is just bullshit. It's not real. So, and Eli Pariser is going to give a talk this afternoon. I invite you to go see what he's saying because he just wrote a great book about this called The Filter Bubble. And why this is, in fact, a bubble. It's an intellectual bubble that we're living in. So what to do about that in the 2 minutes and 16 seconds I've got left, which is about what I thought I'd have. So I want to talk about just some of the stuff that we're doing in the VRM community. In addition, this is in obedience to what Jim Gilliam said earlier, make your own tools. We're doing that. And it's called Project VRM. There's the Berkman Center as it looks most of the winter on the north of the law school. VRM stands for Vendor Relationship Management. It was named that way just so to be the counterpart of Customer Relationship Management, but it works for relating to anything. It's the idea that we're giving individuals tools that make them independent and better able to engage. Those two things, independence and better able to engage. And they're your tools. They're not somebody else's tools. They don't have to, they could be corporate in the sense that the company can sell them to them or give them to you, but they could be duplicated. They could be substituted. You're not locked in one way or another. So the user drive. So for example, relating on your own terms. If you look on the right side of this, I don't know how clear it is. Yeah, there's a couple of buttons there. We call them R buttons for relationship buttons. But the idea is you click on one of those and you see what your terms are and what their terms are. And if they match up, you could do business. You could actually have a one-to-one equal relationship. And you'll be able to say, you could be able to proffer your terms in a real free contract way. Free contract like we kind of lost 150 years ago. Say no tracking, no personally identifiable information, selective and secure data disclosure, selective disclosure, data back in a usable form. There's a long list of these things. And we're working this stuff out. There's a lot of smart people working on this thing. Write your own rules. There's a company called Kinetics in Salt Lake City, run by Phil Windley, who is the former CIO of the state of Utah. And what Kinetics does, it doesn't replace client server, but it allows you as a user to either write your own rules or buy some from a supplier where it doesn't matter what event happens anywhere, but if that event happens and it can trigger a rule, you can write the rules. They're carried out by a rules engine. A rules engine can be anywhere. And so you can start wiring things together your way rather than their way. And do GRM for government relationship management. GRM is something that this guy, Britt Blazer, who's here somewhere, I don't know where he should have gotten in. Britt's been, and I took that picture of him across the street yesterday. Britt's been pushing this rock along for a long time and doing an incredibly good job of trial and error, making it better. He's got something called newgov.us, here it is, where you have, it's based on Drupal, which is an open source content management system, a lot of us know. And it can, you can take the code yourself or you can use his. But the idea is that you will manage your politicians. You will manage your Public Utilities Commission. You can manage your relationship with these entities on your terms and not just theirs. And it can be social, it can be collective. Obviously it has to be if it's a democracy. But you don't just passively go into one silo or another and just use it through that. So those are 3 samples. That's sort of an hors d'oeuvre tray for what we're doing on VRM. And I want to leave you with this because my time is up and lunch awaits. This is Evan Moglen. I shot this picture of him yesterday. He looks positively huge. I love it. He's one of my heroes. And he said this yesterday, and people tweeted it, and it's just so right. So I want to leave you with these words and let you all have lunch. Thank you very much.